one of my poems got published in anthology. Okay. Yeah, the ones.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was gonna like send you the link.
Can I angle this down?
Yeah.
I had the honor of welcoming you all tonight. My name is Carol Minkiti. My husband was Ifeanyi Minkiti, who died almost 3 years ago, and he bought the store 15 years ago with great excitement and pleasure and devotion to it too. And this is going to be a wonderful reading tonight. I just wanted to welcome you all here. And we have people on Zoom. And I wanted to also thank James, our wonderful manager, and Naima is going to introduce the poets. So again, welcome to a very sacred and wonderful place. Thank you for being here.
Hello, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Naima Tani. I'm an intern at the Grolier this summer, so I have the pleasure of giving the introductions tonight. Jennifer Barber's new collection of poems is The Sliding Boat Our Bodies Made, published by WordWorks in 2022. She is co-editor with Jessica Greenbaum and Fred Marchant of the anthology Tree Lines, 21st Century American Poems, published by Grayson Books in 2022. She has poems forthcoming in Upstreet, Ibbetson Street, On the Seawall, and Post Road, and she is the current Poet Laureate of Brookline, Mass. Stephen Cramer's 6 poetry collections include Listen, published by MadHat Press in 2020, Clangings, published by Sarabande Books in 2012, and Goodbye to the Orchard, published by Sarabande in 2004, a Sheila Motton Prize-winner and a Massachusetts Honor Book. Published in the Atlantic Monthly, the Paris Review, Poetry, and More, and recipient of fellowships from the Massachusetts Cultural Council and the National Endowment for the Arts, he founded and currently teaches in Lesley University's Low-Residency MFA program in creative writing. Petition, Joyce Peseroff's 6th book of poems, was designated a must-read by the Massachusetts Book Award, as was her 5th collection, Know Thyself. She edited Robert Bly, When Sleepers Awake, The Plowshare's Poetry Reader, and Simply Lasting, Writers on Jane Kenyon. She has received grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Mass Cultural Council and a Pushcart Prize. Recent poems and reviews have appeared in Mass Poetry's The Hard Work of Hope, On the Seawall, and Aerosmith Journal. She directed and taught in UMass Boston's MFA program in its first 4 years. Currently, she blogs for her website, So I Gave You Quartz, at joycepeseroff.com, and writes a poetry column for Aerosmith Press. Before we get started, I just want to remind you to silence your cell phones and wear a mask over your mouth and nose for the duration of the reading. Thank you.
I guess that's usually have to figure out how to get through here. It's okay for me to take this. Welcome, everybody. Keeping a bookstore like the Grolier Poetry Bookshop alive and well really is a labor of love. And we owe a big debt to Carol, to James. Elizabeth Doran is here, longtime Grolier employee, and to Louisa and to Ifeanyi. So I'm very appreciative of all the combined years they put into the Grolier. So probably like me, you get calendars in the mail, nature calendars. Usually they're in appreciation for a donation or trying to get a donation. And I get 4 or 5 of them. And I think it's easy to kind of toss them aside and not really focus on them. But the photography in many of them, it's just so beautiful. So this has to do with that. And it's called Audubon Calendar, June. So, excuse me. So Rosie,
the air. So perfect, the plover. I can't bear to lift the page, though July and August are also gone. He stands on long legs at the day's edge in sugary sand. His body the size of a chick, wings tucked against his puffy sides. A compact beak, the color of bronze. The round eye scanning. If he blinks, the blink is infinitesimal, thinnest splinter in time. Continuum. A split screen showed my father and me. One of those conversations with no content, apart from the usual checking in. They gave me 16 minutes, he said, to make this call. Then I understood he needed permission where he was. He wore a baggy sweater and loose slacks. The room around him white, a white paper lantern overhead, walls, window, and desk, but no door. Sure, it was a dream. Even so, he put down the phone so soundlessly. And this poem is called The Mourner. I found 6 tea lights in a drawer and lit them all with a single match. The apples on the table glowed like lamps. I tried to hear the timbre of my father's voice. I thought of the creatures Ezekiel saw, half human, half animal, eyes all over their bodies, even their backs. I couldn't weep, so I didn't. Sometimes I cried out in my sleep. Each curling wick sizzled, wax pulled around each flame. Gonna stop for a sip of water here. At least it's not 90 degrees out today, huh? Hi, Mary. The next 2 poems that I'll read have angels in them. And I'm not really sure how that happened. That's not my usual thing, but they stayed in. Lake Constance. Sunlight in the water streaming from my arms, the bubbles of my mouth. No one else around. I'm here between the heavens and you, the edge of sky and the tops of trees, an angel says. Between the burning world and flooded world, the first day and the last. And his words take on the sound of waves mumbling on shore. July drought mixed with August rain. Patches of blue among the clouds falling to the water like dropped leaves. Their shadows gliding over fish, breathing through them, into them. No, not an angel, not the words, but the lake cradling my limbs in ripples striated with light. If we go back a few years to the first spring of the pandemic, that's when this poem was written. It's called On This Day. A light goes on in the house at the top of the hill behind the school. A car alarm at dawn, no thief in sight. A tree rubs a cloud between its fingers. What good is noticing such things when you're furious with me? To say nothing of the squirrel upside down acrobatic on the trunk. Remnants of snow dissolve from the ground like a wrong idea. A splinter in the meat of my palm won't surface despite the probing needle. I got it, running my hand along the railing as I climbed the attic stairs to sit and read at my desk. No book on the shelf spoke to me. Love wrecks us, doesn't it? Love throws us a life rope. Oak branches toss shade onto the curtain in the den. A driver takes a package from his truck. Angels, unlike cherubim, appear sometimes without their wings in the guise of a messenger. Not a vision of another world, a squinting toward what disappears. Cherubim carry the scroll of days. Angels say the words. This next poem came about, the idea for it came about while I was driving. Sometimes you hear things on the radio that really make you want to pull over to the side of the road to focus. So this report was about a type of bird called the manakin. There are 54 species of manakins, but the one described was the club-winged manakin. And the poem also references the Sumerian mythological couple, Inanna and Dumuzi. She was a kind of love goddess, and he was a mortal, and he was a herder of sheep and goats. So some lines in the poem are in Inanna's voice, and those were taken from a cycle of poems about her that were written probably around 2000 BC. Frequency and pitch. In a piece on the radio about the club-winged manakins in a cloud forest on the Andes slopes, the male makes a strange music. One feather has 7 ridges. The hard curved tip of another strikes the ridges like a spoon against a washboard, hitting each ridge twice, 14 times per shake. He shakes 100 times a second, 1,400 notes. The female thrills to the pulse. Darwin said the manakins evolved solid bones to bear the rattling. Their flying suffered, their music soared. Restless after you go out, thumbing through world poetry, I find the cycle of the goddess Inanna. I bathed for the shepherd Dumuzi. I perfumed my sides with ointment. I coated my mouth with sweet smelling amber. I painted my eyes with kohl. He shaped my loins with his fair hands. The shepherd, Dumuzi, filled my lap with cream and milk. The oak shakes its leaves a few at a time, then all at once in the window by the bed. I think of the sliding boat our bodies made. And the setting of this next poem is one of the hill towns in Western Massachusetts, and it's called Hilltown. You're walking along a road that climbs past a farmhouse, a field, another farm. No cars or trucks in driveways. Nobody's home, so you can choose the house you want. This one, a patch of Queen Anne's lace, and 2 off-white horses in the yard, broad of back, but plowless, wagonless. A yellow cat steps past you into the long grass. Your mouth opens as you eavesdrop on the trees in the wind's throat, their dry fricatives. Will a dog appear barking like a fiend? If he does, don't listen. Don't forget you are traveler and lookout, prodigal, each turn in the road a place to leave. This next is a return to Inanni and Dumuzi. It's later in their story together, and it has to do with the underworld. Parts of their story are similar to Demeter's cyclical loss of her daughter Persephone. The poem starts in the present, but soon goes into that story. And it's another one that has to do with the pandemic in some way. It's called Duration. Rain drowning the shriveled marigolds. The way this month seems like 6. The goddess Inanna, searching for her husband, Dumuzi, after her escape from the underworld. She doesn't know that demons captured him to punish her. They strike him with a shepherd's crook. She doesn't know that demons pierce his cheek with a nail. They shatter his cup and splinter his churn. They seize his goats and sheep. They strip him of scepter and crown. Inanna searches on and on. At last, a gossiping fly leads her to the barren steppe where Dumuzi lies. He must spend half of every year beside the queen of the world below. Dumuzi weeps. Inanna weeps. Inanna and Dumuzi weep. Even the word duration is hard, as waiting is, as seasons are. There are bridges elsewhere over a river, terraces and market stalls. But here this morning, the first snow adheres to autumn leaves clinging to branches. The trees lean forward with the unaccustomed weight. And I'll end with a poem that's called Mountain Outside Grenoble. What I remember most is a confusion of bells, sheep like woolen slipknots over the tufted grass. The din of dogs warned us off, as if we'd come to abscond with a lamb in our arms. Hundreds of feet below, the city lay in a haze of cars, buses, and heat. Where the trail went under trees, we heard the cuckoo's cries, contrapuntal, invisible. Let me pour it all again into the cup of my ear. The bells, the cuckoo's call and response. However far away, let me keep this place among my gathering flock. Thank you very much.
Jennifer, get back here, should I?
Yes. Oh, why don't you come through?
Yeah.
There's a
Oh, okay.
space.
We'll do
Like having a reading on the green line.
Yeah, that's right.
This is really, right. I have to take off my mask, but if I take off my glasses, you guys won't hear anything, so. This is everything that Jennifer said about the Grolier was said with such eloquence that all I can say is ditto. Because needs to be repeated. Thank you, Jennifer. Those are, your poems are crystalline, nothing wasted. Oh, thank you. I'm going to read, for some reason, I decided to put together a reading, a couple poems from Listen, a couple poems from a manuscript that may be done, may not, and a couple poems from another manuscript that I'll describe in a second. The fact that I have maybe two manuscripts is really unsettling. It's like finding an extra child in your house that you didn't know you had. I decided to pick 8 poems, most of them short, that have, each one has something, however obliquely, to do with history or the social world. I felt impelled to do that, given the state of the world we're in. They're not all, I don't think. In fact, 2 of them I hope are kind of entertaining. One is an obit and the other is an elegy. But I think that the tone of them is a little different than some of the others. Okay, I'm going to start with the obit and end with the elegy. This is a poem called Obit for Richard Nixon's Barber. Richard Nixon retired to New Jersey. A lot of people think that he would have retired to California, but he didn't. He retired to Saddlebrook, I think it was the name of it. It was very close to where I grew up.
Very famous.
There's a reference to a group of indigenous people named the Lenape. There's a town named Hohokus, and I even put the accent mark with the second syllable. It was originally unhyphenated, and then it was hyphenated, and that was actually done by referendum in the town.
I know from
And
Lesley.
there's a reference to vetiver, which is a kind of essence oil that I looked it up recently, and apparently it smells warm, so it's kind of a Keatsian essence, I guess. Obit for Richard Nixon's Barber, Dominique Parisi, 1943 to 2020. Apprentice to a blacksmith in Sicily, emigre to New Jersey's Bergen County, more heads to shear than hooves to shod, farrier turns barber. God bless America. Dominic's and Petro's studio, walk-ins welcome, 616 Maple Avenue, Hohokus, Lenny Lenape for running water, where times change but not our citizens, unless the referendum passed to add twin hyphens rates as change. Birthplace of Aaron Burr and Twisted Sister, where men, women, and category other live proud of their names spelled like no other, where circa 1985, after an edgy sleep, Dom takes the long route to the studio, loitering where the Saddle River tapers, the star ledger unfurled on his lap. Time enough to get last night's scores by heart, then to arrive early, but not too early, to the shop before a golden sedan pulls up. The driver hands his passenger a 10 spot. For 9 years, the palaver sticks to the Yanks, the Giants. Politics? Never, except who's in, who's out. In Hocus, their atmosphere, the leathery, fugitive musk of aftershave, vetiver, bay rum. I hope it's still appropriate to hate Richard Nixon. United know it's kind of outdone recently in some ways by others, but his administration did. It was under his administration we got the National Endowment for the Arts. I didn't need to say, do people know who Richard Dixon was today? I assume. Okay, these two poems are in Listen. The first, pardon me?
Never heard of him.
Never heard of them. Well, I envy you. This is after a Slovenian poet named Tomas Solomon, who I think he died about 5-6 years ago. A wonderful poet, interestingly influenced by Frank O'Hara, like a number of the young poets in Eastern Europe were. What I got really interested in was, in some ways, a certain approach to image and syntax in this poem, in his poems, and that's what is particularly after in this poem, after Tomas Solomon. Before I died, I could hear singing from under ash heaps. Motor oil dripped a rosary on the blacktops. I rose with vapor from August dew. I dueled with oak branches. I walked through my smoldering city, whistling. Not one cloud, but you couldn't see the sun. Keep going, I thought. You can sleep under trestles and loot as you wish. Heat exhaled through cracks in the sidewalk. Red ants stormed an apricot pit. I stole an extra pair of socks off a dead man. Birds behaved like birds, that is, like the reptiles from which they're descended. Flashlights burned white, then amber, then not at all. I carried somebody's mother on my back. We sank into mud up to my knees, my thighs, my waist, while God called out, "Get over here and write this minute." I printed these poems out large type from Listen. I'm more comfortable reading from larger print than poems are printed in these days. This poem takes place, the first stanza takes place on a cruise, the one and only time I've ever been on a cruise, the only time I will be. Second stanza takes place in a restaurant at the Sanibel Beach Resort, which my wife and I didn't stay at. We actually stayed at Joyce Peseroff's house in Fort Myers. Thank you for that. But we ate there on our way out, I believe, after visiting you. There are three references to America, two references to Americans, one to America. The first reference to Americans is a reference to Americans. The second reference to Americans is to a breakfast special. Also, this poem came out in an online magazine, and it was the first time I was able to actually use a hyperlink that you could actually go to from the text. Here, I just have to click here. You have to imagine that that it transports you somewhere. It's called Ours, Sanibel Beach Resort. Years ago, we took us and our kids on a 90% white cruise to Istanbul from Rome. In no time, I got smart at discriminating my white from the others. I watched Italians bully in line for iced tea or lemonade, the two free drinks, their Dantesque vowels, honey on the page, a sort of noise pollution in my airspace. The English, being Brits, cued. The French seemed to take their cues from the Italians. The Germans had no sense of line at all. But oh, my Americans, you made mouth sounds like rusted gears, belched at will, your slurry banter fit for jotting down only on the blackest cocktail napkins. And not just did I know your every slight for an exhaustively ugly list, click here, but by tween age, I had the lot by heart. Now, down in Sanibel, our black 30-something waitress warms my coffee. The server's Floridian lilt has me constantly asking, sorry, my tip at 18%, a runt of a reparation. It's her kids, not ours, who will sink first under the next flood. There's jack shit chi or semi-snowbirds like ourselves can do to stop it. Is there a map of downtown? Is the best I've got to ask her. What downtown? For better answer. What's in my brain is more or less in hers, gates that open into gardens outside time. But each gate locks out them, us in, our gardens ours. She's about to clear away the yoky orts of our Americans. We rise to go, no clearer where in America we are. A number of months ago, I was reading Rilke translations like Stephen Mitchell, Edward Snow, and they didn't sound very good to me. So I said, I can do better than that, which is kind of arrogant. But I think that's how a lot of adaptations of poems get started. There's a sense of, wait a minute, is that really how it sounds in the original? And I don't know the original, so it's doubly arrogant. It's ignorant than arrogant, actually. And I did one, and I gave myself 2 rules. Actually, 2 rules and 1 liberty. The 2 rules were every stanza had to be condensed by the equivalent of 1 line. And anytime there was an adjective, I had to try for a verb, or in some cases a noun rather than an adjective, because the Rilke translations, even the good ones, are very adjectival, which may be true in the originals. I know enough about German to know that many German words are sort of so compressed with content that you just, that when you expand it out in English into definers and adverbs and adjectives, you lose the compression. The other thing that I could allow myself to do is to depart as far from the versions I was working with, sometimes so far that what I ended up with had left the premises altogether. In about 10 weeks, I ended up doing 58 of them. And I'm still working on, with Joyce's help and our friend Teresa Cater, figuring out how they talk to each other. But I think it's a collection of something. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm taking too long. This is called I'm going to read 4. This one's called The Town Square. Built, obliterated, and then rebuilt by history. Its uprisings, its crowds amassed for the latest quartering, its kiosks that peddle everything from, I got to start again. Okay. Built, obliterated, and then rebuilt by history, its uprisings, its crowds amassed for the latest quartering, its kiosks that peddle everything from ammonites to grace to the weirder meats, its demagogues on horseback or in limousines, really a trompe-l'oeil. The town square always entreats, look out your windows. All the while, agents and VIPs of unimportance take their front row seats. Craning from their gables, doll-sized houses, silent, strained to see it all, their heads turned from the guard towers stationed behind them. little scared to read this one, but I'm going to read it. The Leda and the Swan myth, as we all know, involves a rape. Yeats writes about it with no attention to the fact, really, that it's a rape. Rilke's poem, Leda, airbrushes the fact that it's a rape. So some of these poems are not so much departures as I hope arguments with the originals, and this is one of them. And it was actually intense to work on this. Leda raped. When need turned him into a swan, he thought, how beautiful. Flustered, he took a minute or so to get into it, to let the deceit of it take hold. And given how this costume made him feel, he hardly recognized himself. But Leda knew the abyss between lust and force, and tried, but couldn't fight him off. With her pinned, he thrust her legs apart. His long neck swelled, and he came. Then he took the time needed to admire his every feather, an animal for real. It's called Bomb Sight. The Rilke original, and this one is just called After the Fire. Bomb Sight. Morning ignores it, but who knows? The burnt lime trees and pitted blocks of flats might be fakes. So might that warm crater filling with kids, God knows from where, who play catch with the littlest one's shirt, then stop to watch a tenant's eldest son poke under the crushed, incinerated deck, teasing out twin tea kettles in a washtub. He looks like he's acting too, for the kids or anyone naive enough to think real folk lived here. Whatever remains is incredible as history now, where everyone's a stranger. And I'll just read one more. I'll get to the elegy. I hope it's called Elegy for Little Richard. There are a number of voices in it, and I'll sort of go like that, or I hope. There's a lot of Little Richard quotes in it, which I think ought to be obvious. There's a reference to Satori, which is a Zen term for sudden enlightenment. The duende is Lorca's term for inspiration, dark sounds. That's all. Elegy for Little Richard. Satori. Oh, I should just say, I did take a class at Antioch on Zen Buddhism, and it was a wonderful class. And everything was narrative evaluations there. We didn't get grades. And we all got the same evaluation, a blank page at the end of the class. His name wasn't Dr. Tufel, but it worked for this. Satori can surge upon you on the subway, lectured Dr. Tufel in Intro Zen. The mire gives us the very substance of art, goes Lorca's play and theory of the duende. A wop, bop, a loo bop, a wop, bam, boom, reflected Little Richard in a Macon Greyhound's terminal's greasy spoon, up to his biceps in Georgia suds, boss man piling on pot atop pot atop pot. And that's exactly what I meant at the time. Of the two strands of modesty, false and true, he knew neither. I put that little thing in it, he said of Little Richard's boogie, gospelized flop, in no way tutti frutti, green as air before a downpour. Always had that thing, but didn't know what to do with that thing I had. For consistency, he'd win the Whitman Contradiction Prize. Gay? I founded gay. I wore makeup and eyelashes when no men were. But once a chartered flight caught fire in a dream, Jesus Christ made men men, women women, sermoned minister Richard Penniman. Saturi, Duende, Damon versus Demon. One draws from light, the other swills beer stink at the Star Club, Hamburg, 1961. He didn't open for the Beatles opened for him. Backstage, he'd preach from Revelations. We'd all sit around and listen just to hear him talk, remembered Lennon, whose dying monosyllable, yeah, I'll never not recall. Down to the loaf-sized radio, the news dirged through. I call that time my decade-long lost weekend. His own one and only, for years, an ancient star I didn't know wasn't dead. In fact, it was the Fab's blandish cover of his Long Tall Sally that schooled the Beatle demonic white mass of us. Don't sit so still. Sex sings best in tongues, if not yet drag. Truth's not only beauty, but raw joy.
Joyce will just stand here.
Okay. Here. Figure it out. Here, how about you come up here? Let's come over here. It's just like a Rubik's Cube. It's like a Rubik's Cube.
Oh, James's fault. So close together.
I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. And this is the first in-person reading I've done for my book Petition. And it's wonderful to do this with two poets I admire so much, Jenny Barber and Steve Cramer. And it's really wonderful to do it at the Grolier, which has been so much a part of my life and life, I think, of all the poets here for many, many years. So thank you, and thank James too. I'm going to start by reading from my new book, not so new anymore, but newest, Petition. And I'm going to begin with the title poem, and I don't think I have to say anything about it. I'll just start. Petition. Give the wealth back to those we stole it from. Give the land back to those we stole it from. Give our shotguns to those we took the land from. Maybe they'll split the barrels into irrigation pipes. Maybe they'll mill the stalks for bookends, for the books by those we took language from. Give love back to those we banished from our love. Give life back to all who lost insurance for their meds. Give medicine back to those who find it in a tea, a weed, a willow, the heat and light in hands needing a muscle. Give muscle to the tongue's back talk, curses, and its sweetest nothings, the lay of a ripe peach. Give ripeness to a time. Give us time to restore the forests and the sea we filtered of whales, codfish, and pink dolphins. Give us eternity again. We'll set things right. This next poem I'm going to read is called Receipt, and a lot of it takes place in the Burlington Mall. The cashier at CVS asks if I want a receipt, and I smile, no. The gas pump screen chimes, receipt, yes/no. And I tap no since I heard the ink on the paper is carcinogenic, or maybe the paper itself. Buying groceries, I crumple a 2-foot printout I don't need since every transaction's recorded by my credit card, and I don't bother with coupons. No one questions whether I own my lunch meat or prescription or the fuel that guns me out of town. I overheard a man laugh in Sears when asked if he wanted a bag for his gold toes. Are you kidding? A black man walking out of here with a pair of socks in his hand? Whereas I disdain plastic bags that might stuff a landfill. Whereas no one will ask whether I own the shoes I wear leaving the store, my old sandals left in a box for the clerk to dispose of. In 3 towns in 3 states, no one looks twice when I drop something into my purse. Could be nail polish, could be a gun, could be a bottle I'm nipping at. Hello, hashtag white lady feminist who never got a ticket, always a warning. Okayed for TSA pre-check. If I want to return a sweater, I'll return the sweater with or without a receipt. As Stephen alluded to, I spend part of the winter in Fort Myers, Florida. And this is a poem about leaving. Usually I leave the middle of May, and cleaning up, packing up, and shutting down the house. And one of the things you have to do is clean out the refrigerator. Then this poem begins actually with reference to Osip Mandelstam and Anna Akhmatova, the Russian poets. And there's a poem this alludes to, which Stephen has translated. And it's
Another
in,
language I don't know.
and it's in his new book. Listen, if you want to hear more about that. So this poem is called Egg. Who imagines the future as it will happen? Did Mandelstam think he'd die for comparing Stalin's fingers to grubs? The night of his arrest, his wife invited Akhmatova for dinner and boiled her an egg. A fresh egg was a rare thing. Before the secret police took him, Mandelstam ate the egg Akhmatova offered with salt. I cleaned the refrigerator before leaving the place I've lived for 6 months. There's a carton with 1 egg left. The look of hibiscus beguiled me, and jasmine perfume for half a year. I cared for now, forget the future. Now what should I do with this egg? Not enough for a meal, stale, maybe good for a batch of pancakes. My mother said wasting food is a sin. There are people on this planet, thousands, who die for an egg. Though at my age it won't, I assume the future will be like now. My friends would laugh if I gave them a single egg. Would my mother laugh, or her mother, widowed with 3 children? I drop the egg. The disposal grinds it to a slurry that will be flushed and purified, mingled with the river and salting the sea. This is my lyric for failing to find one of the homeless vets camped by the river and giving him the egg. I kayaked once past a tent patched with a blue tarp, and Jeff, curious, wanted to paddle ashore. I could barely find breath to say no, so profound was the privacy of a sandy crescent between mangroves. A tent, a hibachi, a folding chair, a styrofoam cooler. Who could have dreamed this future? And an egg. What could one egg do to redeem it? This next poem is called Irish Music, and it comes from reading a book by Lisa Genova called Still Alice, which is about a woman who develops early onset Alzheimer's, and it's one of the most terrifying books I've ever read. So, Irish Music. A blind man with sight surgically restored can't recognize what he sees in blobs of color, puzzle shapes. He walks in a painting by Clay or Miro. With no depth perception, everything's flat. To a woman with Alzheimer's, a dark red rug looks like a hole in the floor, a bloody hole. She can't open her front door without stepping past it and won't let anyone in, except a blind man, maybe, who wouldn't notice anything amiss. In movies, a doctor unwraps enough bandages to succor a regiment before the big reveal. The hero can see again. In life, the newly sighted sometimes prefer darkness to looming abstractions accelerating past at hard to reckon speeds. So the operation is reversed, which allows the man to sit next to the demented woman, a sweet woman who loves Irish music, and hold her hand as long as it needs to be held. I'm going to finish by reading 2 newer poems, and both of them are pandemic poems and allude to that strange time of isolation and when time seemed to be out of joint. This first poem at the summer solstice was published in Steve Retiner's Red Letter Poems, which is a wonderful listserv. It's something you should get on, where Steve sends a poem every Friday with his very thorough and complete commentary to those on his list. So I highly recommend it. And this is about that confusion of time during and season during the first pandemic year. At the summer solstice, rain had sluiced the budding cones from tips of pines, and in the dark, our headlights took the litter for a fall mulch of brown, tire-shredded leaves. We thought another season had gone AWOL, like spring in its isolation bubble. No friend given in marriage or fitted for a mortarboard. or standing over thawed ground to bury winter's dead. Perhaps summer too had passed without goodbyes, whispered face to face, a crush kissed in a canoe, or license plates tallied on the holiday drive to Mama's Colorado cousins. Are we there yet? Kids ask, a mile from home. Space and time, a fluid mystery. And this last poem I'm going to read was published as part of the Hard Work of Hope series by Mass Poetry. And I started this poem after listening to the radio, which can be very inspirational. And it was an interview with a woman in Worcester who created during the pandemic this room where you could just go and break things and just get out all your frustrations. And she was interviewed on WBUR. So this is about a visit to the Smash Room. Donated TVs, microwaves, printers, trophies, vases on tables, baseball bats and malls ready by the wall. $50 an hour to play with your boyfriend or alone when it's hard to be a good mom during the workday. Gas up the car, make beds. Tag plexiglass with rants against cancer, COVID, Trump. Throw plates towards the back. Don't hold a bottle by the neck. A shared screen, better than screen sharing. Pummeling a stranger's stuff, better than stuffing your face with Oreos. Why not meditation? I'm noisy, says the owner. We have yoga here, but it's loud. We break shit. Before and after photographs. Happy, healthy Anne was here. Gil and Chris. Maya is chilling. The pandemic says you can't. The smashing, yeah, you can. Do it. Do it harder. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming. Can we just give all the poets another round of applause? Just stack your chairs and put them against the wall. That would be great. And then we have books for sale and the poets will be signing them. So stick around for that if you'd like. Have a great night.
I can send you the list.